It's Colin Kramer of the Populist Papers podcast, and I received an interesting message earlier asking me what I think of Brett Kavanaugh, and my reply has taken on the form of this video now. So, lie number 1, the Devil's Triangle. How stupid does Brett think we are, trying to tell us that that's the name of a drinking game? I mean, come on. If at least he hadn't replied with such intensity, with his hands firmly clasped, just immediately being like, it's a drinking game, then, I wouldn't be so suspicious. If he had responded a little bit more relaxed, like, oh, are you talking about that quarters game we used to play? Then I would have considered that maybe I've got the wrong idea. But that's obviously not the case with Kavanaugh. And line number 2 was, have you boffed yet? Now, BK wrote this into a few of his bros' yearbooks, and we don't need the Dictionary of American Slang to let us know what a vulgar reference this is. But remember who we're talking about here. These are some very wealthy teenage jocks about to graduate from Georgetown Prep, and getting boffed is clearly a very serious rite of passage in this all-male circle. But BK just told the world that getting boffed means that you've got flatulence. And then he went on to basically fart all over the entire confirmation process. Considering that passing gas is a pretty easy thing to accomplish, whether you're an adorable little infant or a recently deceased body, it doesn't really sound like something a bunch of belligerent alpha males would be one-upping each other about, does it? But hey, if there's anyone out there who has experience using the term boffing as a way to brag about one's flatulence, I'd love to hear about it. And finally, Brett claimed to have been an alumnus of Renata University, and when questioned about this, he claimed that the whole thing was this reference to her being a good female friend. Well, Renata herself was one of those 65 women who was initially duped into signing a letter of support for Kavanaugh because she didn't see those comments about her until, of course, they made national headlines 36 years later. Again, any dudes out there who attended an all-boys high school and went around making dedications honoring what a good friend some random young woman from another school is, please reach out to me. Now, you may not know this, but I went to a women's liberal arts college in the 2000s, and if I went around telling everybody that I was going to start, let's say, Marilyn Smith University, for guys who think this girl Marilyn on the other side of the county is just so cool and respectable, I would have been laughed out of there as some kind of a maniac. And you're trying to tell me that back in the sexist, homophobic climate of the early 80s, the captain of the football team at this privileged male prep school would have been completely ridiculed? He would have gotten his ass kicked for doing that. Plus, look at all the other absurd entries in the yearbook. He refers to himself as the treasurer of the 100 Kegs or Bust Club. He talks about Ralphing all the time. And in the middle of all this testosterone-fueled sloppiness, you think he's going to take the time to dedicate some thoughtful feminist passage? Can anyone actually picture that? Boo-boo. So how much more respectable would he have seemed if he had just said something like, you know what, I never met her, but she had a promiscuous reputation, and I was trying to impress a bunch of sleazy jocks that I went to school with. That would have been the sign of a grown-up. But responding the way Kavanaugh did was the sign of a psychopath. And remember, Merrick Garland was the moderate Republican that Obama tried to appoint, 2 years ago when Scalia actually died? And he was never even granted a hearing. We had to wait over 420 days until he was replaced by Gorsuch. And now that Kennedy's leaving, you're going to rush through some bastard that takes you for a fool? We already know that Kavanaugh perjured himself multiple times during his initial hearings, not to mention him having one of the most anti-worker, anti-communist records in history. His only redeeming feature is that I think he was the first person in history to bring up Fast Times at Ridgemont High during a Senate hearing. So regardless of how you feel about Christine Beasley Ford or Kavanaugh's 4 other accusers or the Me Too movement in general, do you seriously want someone that lies to your face sitting on the Supreme Court for the rest of his life? Get him out of here!